This is a Distraction Therapy podcast. Whatever gets you through the day.
Hello, it's Wednesday the 12th of August and this is a Distraction Therapy podcast, which I've not done one for a long time, and I started this off at the beginning of the lockdown, did a couple, and then nobody had really talked to us. It's kind of dried up.
I'll talk to you, Rob.
So I've come and met John Costa for a coffee, and we're going to have a break from doing the other podcast that we do on a regular basis together, because this means that we can kind of just talk about any old rubbish that we want to talk about. So this is
and that should be no problem.
Yeah, for at least an hour. So or as long as the batteries last in the recorder. So the idea of this is to just really think about whatever gets you through the day. You know, it's what are your distractions? What are you doing? How are you doing in terms of keeping yourself occupied and not thinking about things too much? And what's been your, we're out of lockdown now in Leicester, so what's it been like coming back to slowly kind of building back up and getting into cafes? And here we are at Cafe Orso, which is perhaps one of our favourite haunts in the city.
Well, I think it's the fact that it's quite a distance away from any kind of traffic. Traffic occasionally goes past at the front to get down to the market, but where we are here, I think it's quite relaxing. It's quite nice to sit outside. It's got a nice breeze at the moment. It's a bit warm, but a bit of a breeze, and so you still get that feeling of life going on. And probably sitting here as well as we did a week or so ago for our very first coffee outside together, having a chat since March, it also feels as if life is coming back. It's almost like waking up. It's really weird. It's almost been like an extended Christmas lockdown, with lots
without
of
the
shops.
presents.
Yeah, with shops shut and no people around. It's really strange. It's that kind of early Sunday morning sort of Christmas vibe. And now, as things are opening up again, it's really weird seeing queues outside shops, because it's almost like a thing of the past, queuing up outside a shop, isn't it? Apart from a sale. And some people, observing social distancing, some people with masks, some people without. And I think it's that just general feeling of no one really knows what's going on. Something's happened, obviously, but no one really knows what it is and what it was for and what it was about, and also the impact that it's going to have either.
Yeah, it's like your memory has become this kind of befuddled, kind of, what was that? It's like kind of, we've just had, like when you were a kid and you were on holidays for 6 weeks, it just becomes this period where everything's interchangeable and you're not really sure where your grounding is with it, and then gradually that the steady routine comes back in of popping out for a coffee, or for a lot of people going for a pint, or seeing people going to work or something. It's seeing that some of the shops are open and that they've got opening times. Some of the shops aren't open at the times when you think they should are going to be open, but you have to...
Yeah, because everyone's kind of open a little bit later, like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I think also what you don't realise until you break a routine, and not take a break from a routine, actually break a routine. And obviously lockdown broke a lot of people's routines. Now, whether that's, the work cycle, Monday to Friday and then weekends, whether that was a cycle around, a period of time or an activity, it was long enough to be habit changing, rather than just taking a break from a habit. Like, if you were a regular exerciser and you went to the gym every day or several times a week, you couldn't go to the gym for 3 months. That is a long time. We're not talking about you've taken a 2-week holiday and you've still gone running while you're on holiday, or there's been a flood or a power cut, so you couldn't go for a week or so. I'm talking about habit changing, that you could not exercise in a gym for 3 months, or swim, or do any of that kind of, get a book from the library. All of those things that were habits for people. I think that's what's interesting. People have almost, do you want to go back to what you did before? Are you going to revisit your previous routine, and then I suppose it's if you're brutally honest with yourself, what was it about your previous routine that was so good that you're going to go back to? So I think a lot of people are revisiting things from that point of view.
Sorry, I've just been trying to bring up my camera on my phone, and it asked me a different question when I tried to press on it. They've changed something, or I've changed something, and I was stumped for a minute then. So
software update, probably the heat as well.
Yeah, it could be. But, it has kind of just been. I mean, the worst part was the weather being so rubbish in July. We got our hopes up. May it was really nice. And kind of the main part of the lockdown is like kind of it just gives us something to hold on to. Then you kind of got into June and July, and it was rubbish. And it was weeks and weeks on end. I mean, today we've got the third or fourth day on the run where it's above 25 degrees, which is kind of it's my kind of summer weather. It's a bit warm. You just have to moderate your actions. You take it easy. You can't go rushing around and doing stuff that you might normally do. But just it's like you're not going on holiday, not getting away from the city, that kind of stuff. It just makes it being a bit more pleasant to just relax a bit more.
And I also think if we'd have had some of the sport going on as well, I can imagine if I don't necessarily mean for the audience to go, because understandably because of COVID-19 you couldn't have football matches and Wimbledon and stuff like that. But if Wimbledon was still on, for example, even with the added crowd noise, I think more people would have watched it. It was just the fact that you couldn't go out. You were physically unable to leave the building and do certain things, but there was nothing to do.
And
anyway,
the Olympics are getting cancelled.
The Olympics,
postponed.
So it's. I'm not saying that they should have gone ahead, but I think when we reflect back over the coming years, because I think it'll be a while before we kind of get out of this COVID-19 pandemic to actually reflect back. That's the thing, and when can we reflect back? Well, it's got to be over first, and I don't think it's going to be over for a while. Is we look back and think, well, there's certain things that they should have kept going, or should have moved ahead with, in order to help with people's mental health and well-being, because at least it was some kind of normality. And you expect the Olympics to be every 4 years. You expect the World Cup to be every 4 years. You expect Wimbledon to be Wimbledon fortnight. You expect. I'm not a football fan, but you expect the FA Cup final to be at that weekend in May, because you build your social scene around it as well. And I think it's the complete disruption of everything that probably will have affected a lot more people, more than they realised if they were honest. I think So I suppose that's going to be the challenge in dealing with people's mental health and well-being.
But you're not. You don't follow sport, do you? You're not like you don't go to any races or anything like that. So what's the kind of thing that's kind of
the Olympics?
What have you been you would have followed the Olympics?
The Olympics, yeah. I mean, it's I think they're still one of those rare events that cuts across. I know they've become very political, haven't they? But they cut across the ability to be able to get people to come together and see the value of participation and rewarding hard work and effort and stuff. And of course, you've got a lot of people that would have trained specifically for 2020, who, even if it's postponed by a year, any elite athlete, and if you follow any of these people's programs and what they do, they're designed to peak at that point. Well, you can't suddenly not train for 3 months, or be training in your back garden, or leaping over a fence to try and keep fit, ready for 2020. It just doesn't work like that. So you've got this whole generation of people that would have missed out on the opportunity to participate in the Olympics. And of course, anyone that's ready for 2024 is training for 2024. Not they can now compete in 2021.
It's 8 years ago today was the closing ceremony for the Olympics in London.
2012. Wow.
Yeah. It was whatever the date is today. It was the one that did the big after party type thing. So
wow.
It's flown over.
And I think when you reflect back as well over a period of time, I was saying to someone yesterday, we mentioned the Olympics, and also we were laughing about this year, the impact on this year, and I said, it'll be like 20 years time when you'll go back and someone will go, I'll look in my diary and it'll go 2019, 2021, and they'll go, what happened to 2020? I'll go, oh, that was that year. Yeah. It's been erased from the records.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But then again, it kind of says to me. I think that the difficult part is, if you like, the lack of imagination, where things could carry on, but okay, they battened everything down for a long period probably in retrospect they'll say it didn't need to be so closed down, and that you could. I mean, it's like, kind of coming to a coffee shop and there's only 3 or 4 people in, coming to a pub with hundreds of people in, just strikes me as what have people not been paying attention to what's been going on, when you kind of get these people crowding into it was Dame Vera Lynn's funeral when the cortege went past, and thousands and thousands. Nobody got moaned about for not social distancing then, but
everyone complained about the Black Lives Matter protests and stuff like that. So it's that kind of even-handedness about the whole thing as well. And I'd like to think that what will come out of it, when there's some genuine reflection about it, is that some stuff was done very well, too early, too late. Some stuff was done badly, too early, too late, or not at all. It's not what happens, it's how you deal with it. So it's how did we deal with it, and then what would you do differently next time, because it's going to happen again.
So what are your tips for
well, I mean,
what have you learned that you want to pass
well, the
on?
thing is, I mean, let's be honest, and with Leicester, the lockdown felt very personal with Leicester, I would say, based on the fact that it probably goes back to, the county and the Tories didn't like the fact that we buried Richard III in the cathedral, or York Minster, but didn't like that, and probably had the nose put out of Bosworth Battlefield and all those kind of things, and all that stuff. People don't forget that. You know what I mean? Sort of the arrogance that comes with
Not
that.
in the Midlands, no. People have really long memories around it.
I don't think the way we approach the city of culture, I think that left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. The way kind of it was dictatorially run in some circumstances, and also that kind of, well, if we didn't get it, we'll have a plan B anyway. And of course, when people get the opportunity, particularly if you've said something about Dominic Cummings as a Labour Party as well with the Tories, and then Sir Peter Salisbury with his own scenario up a ladder and stuff like that, being caught. It's that there's an opportunity to give people a kick in. They don't think about people, you know what I mean? So if you talk about that sort of the red jam in the blue Tory donut of Leicestershire, the ability to collude with the national government to give the Labour City Council a kick in. Well, they're giving everybody in Leicester a kick in. They're not just kicking people that are Labour. And it obviously was politicised, and we were all impacted. Now, it might not impact on you and I beyond lockdown, because it's not necessarily affected our businesses or how we earn money and that kind of stuff. But for people that are running coffee shops like these guys, essential shops and non-essential shops, an extra sort of 2 to 4 weeks of not earning any money, particularly those of making money outside bars, clubs, pubs and stuff, restaurants, that could be the difference between surviving and going under. That 4 weeks, wouldn't it be terrible to lose someone because of that 4 weeks when it became very personal between politicians at the top?
It was also worse because if you were running a business in the city and you were locked down, when everybody was locked down, you're all in the same boat. As soon as the rest of the country was opening up and people could go to your rivals and go and get their hair cut in another town, or go, not have to come into Leicester to get it done, or to buy a car, or to buy goods, or whatever it is, you've lost that trade.
People are taking that money somewhere else.
Yeah, and you're never going to get that back. Whereas when everybody was in lockdown at the same time, then you had the opportunity where you knew you were going to recover at the same time.
And I think there was a lot of political point scoring at the time, again at the detriment to people, ordinary people that are trying to make a living and survive. As is always the case, I know that. I mean, at the end of the day, the people at the top will look after themselves, and the people at the bottom will have to look after themselves because the people at the top are not interested. So I just think when we have that reflection, and certainly I'm not going to be party to any kind of meeting, event, or have anybody on this podcast now where I don't hold them to account going forward, because the days of putting up with that stuff and not calling out poor practice or disinterest has long gone, because otherwise nothing's ever going to change.
If we don't get into plain speaking and saying what we think, we're going to be stuck, aren't we? Because part of the problem is people thinking strategically, or people thinking cautiously because they might offend somebody, and then you find out that they're behind closed doors. There's a lot of briefings going on, whether for or against, whatever it is, and you're never sure where you are, because there is a Midlands thing, not being a Midlander, and you're not a Midlander.
No, I'm from London. Yeah.
And there is a thing of people don't necessarily say directly what it is that they mean. In Liverpool, you can call somebody something, and they might not like it, and they might not like you, and you might not like them, but at least you know that it's out there.
Yeah. Well, it's been said, and without wishing to kind of roll this grenade in the room as well, I think the whole Black Lives Matter thing, the statues being torn down, decolonising and stuff like that. All of that comes from the fact that these meetings are all behind closed doors and no one ever says anything what they mean. You're right. There might be a few punches thrown. Well, that's life, mate. And you upset me, you call me this, then I'll give you a smack in the mouth, and you'll smack me back. But then you kind of move on and you get on with it. But that is life. And I think what happens at the moment is we try so hard not to offend anybody, we end up saying nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing gets said. And because it never then goes. Because nothing ever gets, that's a really big lorry down. When nothing actually ever gets done, so therefore nothing ever moves forward, I think it just festers.
Yeah.
And so what happens then is when something comes along, which is, the death of someone, or, the thing the other day with a Labour MP, getting stopped because apparently her car was from Yorkshire and that was a mistake. These things, they tend to get out of hand because they're always based on the stored up resentment from before, what I mean? And I think that's what we need to be thinking about, the opportunity to clear the air and say it. Even if it upsets someone, it needs to be said. Now I don't agree with the whole kind of the way they do it in America, which is, I'm allowed to say whatever I want because of the First Amendment. I don't care whether you're upset. When you go, well, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, surely. I can disagree with you about every single thing in the world. You and I could have a complete opposite opinion, but because we treat each other with respect and you're entitled to your opinion, I might disagree with you, but I can have a conversation with you where we can then to and fro it, and I'll turn around and go, actually, I didn't really think of it like that. It always comes from, and social media is very good at this, isn't it, which is having an entrenched position. It's not about having an opinion, you have an entrenched position, and then you use other people, normally who are saying things that you might agree with and other people are disagreeing with. Now if you listen to some of the things that Katie Hopkins says, there's a lot of people that would relate to that. Not everything she says, but some of the things that she says. You might not agree with the way that she says it, but the fact that she says it means that it's out there for conversation. And is it good or bad? Well, Nigel Farage is the same. And so what happens then? You end up making pariahs of these people, and not just making pariahs of them, you actually make them famous or infamous.
Martyrs.
Yeah, because they become people that are just happen to speak the truth from their point of view. Like I said, it doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with them. So they then get airtime. And so it's not the fact that maybe Nigel Farage was necessarily right or wrong about Brexit. That's for another podcast. It's the fact that when you wheeled him out on Newsnight, or any of these kind of things where he got more traction than anybody else, well, from their point of view, entertainment, he's going to say something
and that's
controversial.
The problem. That's the problem, is that the system, the machine, the media machine is set up for entertainment,
Yep.
not for illumination or public deliberation or taking responsibility.
Or to inform you, to give you necessarily truthful information or factual information for you to make a judgment. It's more about, do you stand with or against that personality?
We've got a situation at the moment, haven't we? We've got the highest death rate in Europe from COVID-19. We've got the biggest fall in GDP out of all of the G7 countries.
Recession today, I think we've gone into recession.
In recession today, the deepest recession out of all of the European nations.
For 11 years, yeah.
And yet we've got the smallest number of migrants trying to get into the country, and all of a sudden they're headline news.
Use the Royal Navy against them, isn't it?
And being stoked up by the Home Secretary as a diversion away from the things that kind of really do make a difference. But do people keep falling for it? Do people keep is that level of manipulation inevitable? Is it just that most people aren't bothered and we're just trying to get through, we're trying to buy our sausages and go to TK Maxx and get a bargain occasionally, and maybe go and have a drink with our friends. And
Well, I think if you look at some of the conversations that I had with various, you and I have had over lockdown, and also with Rupal Rajani at the BBC, and a few of the sort of producers that have been in touch from various shows at the BBC. Sort of, John Hour's lockdown. So, well, I'm not being artillery shelled. I'm not living in Syria, and everything was working. It's inconvenient, but it's not as bad as places where it is worse. So put it into context. I think it's also about the fact that we never really get any kind of context. You know what I mean? We're always able to react to things. We're not reacting for the right reason. I think the migrants in the Channel is one of those things. It's a ready formed story that's already been there forever, and someone has decided that, being as we've done the Jimmy Savile story, we've given Prince Andrew a tough time. We can't really talk about Harry and Meghan because they're somewhere else.
They usually call it a silly season story, isn't it?
We've done,
it's like, pick this off the shelf. The politics is all in. Shut down. They're on holiday, all that kind of stuff.
So you then have the Madeleine McCann one they always wheel out, and so now it's
Meghan
actually
and Harry.
Yeah, let's bash migrants again, and it just so happens that on this particular day they caught that many boats going across. That's really good. Let's fire it up because we can link that with the whole Brexit thing. The French don't care, and you just think, are people looking at this stuff and then not thinking that all of this is distraction?
And the context being that Lebanon has the highest number of refugees anywhere per capita in the world. I think it's 1.5 million, something like that, and they've been there for one of the longest periods. And that's
a real drain on the people that live there, and an impact. And again, old John said drain. Oh, that's really negative. He's saying, well, no, they are a drain. I didn't say they were a problem, or they're brought problems.
Resources.
They are a problem because they are an extra 1.5 million people. We're upset about 5 boats a day coming across. You know what I mean? You can imagine if that many people came, that you had another city 3 times the size of Leicester was created over years through systemic wars and conflicts, and
Manchester,
and you're never getting any help from anybody. And then suddenly the wheels come off spectacularly, and people wonder why.
And in some way, that's what's happened over, with the pandemic, is the wheels have come off the wagon, and we've got, Manchester's gone back into a form of lockdown. Leicester has to stay in lockdown because, the result of social policies over the last 10 years, maybe longer, have suddenly come back home to roost, because if you don't put the investment in to develop social systems that enable people to be able to live meaningful, satisfied lives, then when it comes to something like a pandemic and a lockdown, the poorest and the least well educated and the people who are easiest to ignore are the ones who are going to bear the brunt of it. And it's all very well kind of deciding all your social policies from the point of view of a leafy market town in the southeast and protecting people's mortgage costs and things like that. But when it comes to actually dealing with a public health crisis, you need a completely different head, different mindset in order to be able to, and we haven't had that. We've taken that away. So, if you have large numbers of refugees, migrants in one place, it's a public health issue. And you have to put all of those things, hospitals, temporary hospitals, you have to put all of that in place. Yeah, I met a guy a few years ago who's from Lebanon. He's when I visited Montpellier for a holiday, and he'd learnt 3 or 4 languages from the UN troops. He went to a UN school, and then he was working in France as a computer programmer. And so he was fluent in about English, French. It's the Lebanese language. It's Arabic. So he's had kind of quite a few languages. Spanish he'd learnt as well. And he said he actually benefited from the influence of the UN system there. But they they made sure there was an education system there, and parents had made sure that their kids went through as much as possible went through the education system, because that was one of the ways out. Whereas what we've done in the UK is we've kind of, the academisation and everything is really a way of divide and conquer. So those people in, it's the Altrincham model. They don't want to. They're part of the. Can't be part of the Greater Manchester lockdown because we're Cheshire. and it's the Wigston and what were the other places in Leicester? Oadby. Well, we're not part of Leicester. It's like, you're technically, from a geographical point of view, you're part of the same conurbation, and it's got to be closed down. But politically, there's a world of difference, and people have just ignored those problems because you got a comfortable property on the outskirts of a city or in a dormitory town away from a city, and you've got good access, and the money's getting spent on the roads and the transport network to make sure that you can get to and from the city to go to work, then the problems within the city nobody gives a damn about. It's just leave it to fester. But when push comes to shove, all of a sudden people are shocked that, hang on a minute, there's all these problems we have to deal with. There's illiteracy, and people don't speak English, and people haven't got permanent jobs, and people haven't got sick pay, and and there's all these things, having to work in sweatshops just to pay the rent through a pandemic. And it's like, what did you expect?
I think a lot of people don't realise that the system is broken. The system doesn't work.
The system is working perfectly, but it's designed to work against some groups of people and for other groups of people, and it does that very well.
Yeah, and I think the whole kind of issue around schooling has been a real thing at the minute. I think no one will probably be under any illusion, and happy for people to disagree with me, that what's been proven is that school is childcare. Because if you've got people that came to us at the university that couldn't read and write very well, but they'd been through the education system, yet their schools were doing well in league tables and they'd passed all those GCSEs, but they still couldn't read and write, then suddenly you realise that school it's childcare, and it's about the monetisation and the new economy, as they've done with the universities. It's all about making money. It's not about educating people in a way that they need to understand what they're doing, or that it's going to be in any way helpful or useful to them to be able to get that education. So you've now got the situation with young people that are graduating now with no graduation ceremony, etc. They've got a degree, but there's even less work. There's going to be even less work than there was before. Where is the conversation about that system working or not working? That's what I don't see.
No, and it's wrapped up in, let's throw them some sweeties, some trinkets, let's give them a grade, and a grade, we're just going to have to give them a grade and kind of make them feel good about it. The education system's become all about, it is like an 18 to 30 holiday, it's like kind of what you're paying in for. And I see, you see the articles in the press, don't you, about young people, kind of they're and this is going to sound really terrible. It's kind of
make you sound old.
It's going to make me sound like a right miserable fart. But it's like looking after our young people and making sure that they're not uncomfortable. So we look after people's mental health. But where's the challenge? Where's the challenge that impels those people to want to demand change, to want to bring about meaningful change, rather than just saying, it's like, oh yeah, it's tough, and everybody should be looked after, and everybody should be a winner, and all that kind of stuff. But at some point, somebody's got to sit there and say, this system's rotten. What are the jobs that, I grew up in the 80s.
Go on, Rob.
Sorry, I know it's like I'm
distracted.
I grew up in the 80s, and you come from Liverpool, and you kind of, you internalise that negativity that you get in terms of a whole city being thrown away, dismissed, and a lack of social investment through the 80s. And it's on record. The cabinet wanted to just throw away the key and lock it up and not pay any attention to it, let it die. Heseltine comes along and goes, no, you can't do that. For however well intended or however much he actually achieved, but then. You kind of live through that, and one of the reasons I ended up deciding that I was going to go to university was because I thought I'm forever at the bottom of the heap, and forever, you have less choices because you're less educated about something, and you just have to kind of sometime put in place something. But my imperative wasn't to go to university on the basis that I would then I didn't know what kind of jobs would be available. Things were changing so fast. My sense of what kind of work I could do afterwards was very limited, because I didn't have the social experience, I suppose. And then, unless you wanted to go down to London, which I didn't want to do anyway, what was around. But I suppose the point that I'm trying to say is that, I did have a strong idea that I wanted to change things and that things should be different, but things carried on drifting in the way that they did. So there was the super concentration of work in London, the brain drain from the rest of the country, and the kind of the focus on the southeast, which makes it almost impossible to have a good solid jobs for a long period of time elsewhere in the country. And I suppose you put it, but the idea is that I wasn't on a conveyor belt. I wasn't getting a pass into having a comfortable life. And why are we presenting this to people to say this is something that will make you the rest of your life easier in some kind of way? You buy a ticket, you pay your money, you're laden with debt, but you will be gilded. You will be on this conveyor belt to having a more prosperous life. It's like, and there's no work that you have to do with that. There's no challenge. There's nothing where you have to roll your sleeves up and get involved and say, we need to change this. The way this is set up isn't right. It isn't working.
I think, it's an interesting one, education. I think I've said it before on one of the podcasts. It's, we probably need to take health and education out of politics, and get the best people for making those decisions together to do, because obviously the education of young people for the country is important, and so is the health of the nation is important, and they're inextricably linked as well. So when you get horror stories of so many thousand young people, their teachers are giving them a grade, then they get a grade that's less than the one that they did for their mock. And it appears to be that it's based on their postcode because they're underperforming schools. You suddenly think it is all about manipulation and social engineering. Now, I know the government's gone back on that and they've apologised up in Scotland, but it looks like they're probably going to do that in the UK as well, the rest of England, so no one's going to lose their predicted grade.
But in that case, nobody loses their privilege either. So that's the problem. Is that I think actually probably what's happened is that it's actually been the most honest set of grades, and that those people who were predicted because their teachers liked them because they come from a nice comfortable background and they weren't difficult, and they'd been overestimated in what their performance might be, and actually to see the disparity between the two kind of lays it bare.
Yeah. And I said the way these things get covered in the media as well, the role that the media plays in reporting that stuff. I mean, one of the things I want to talk about, you probably heard me say this before as well, but I said this on one of my very first podcasts ever, it's the words that we use. John walked into the room and the room reacted. Blimey, what did you say? And I said, well, hello. And then everyone reacted back. They all said hello back. When did reaction become a word that's associated with tension or, like young people and youth? And so when someone turned around and said, what we're going to do is we are going to say to people that we need to be realistic about how we're going to make changes in society so that schools can open again in September. Who thought it would be a good idea to turn around and say, well, we're going to have to close pubs. It's shut pubs or open schools. And you turn around and go, that's designed to be deliberately provocative.
And one's unionised and one isn't. And the unions in the schools are causing this problem deliberately. You're being politically manipulated, and it's like, and just opening the pubs without any thought for people's safety is not. Maybe the pub should be unionised. There's an idea. Let's do that. It's when did safety of children and safety of employees become the problem?
It certainly seems to be driven by, or that suddenly lockdown being unlocked and the virus disappearing suddenly seems to be driven by an economic need for things to get back to normal, as opposed to people being safe. And then suddenly who's worthy and who's not worthy of dying. They certainly seem to have sacrificed people in care homes and stuff.
How are you finding at the moment with things like I haven't watched TV news in a long time, so I kind of don't know what's going on, and I don't listen to the radio news anymore. I'm picking things up from some of the newspapers, the news feeds that I look online. I tend to avoid things like the Apple and the Microsoft news digests that they do. What's it called? There's a couple of news summary services that I kind of subscribe
Aggregators,
to.
yeah.
I subscribe to, but nothing that much. But other than that, I kind of feel as if I haven't got a clue what's going on at the moment. And I would have thought I'd have been reasonably well informed, but I don't even know who people are anymore.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't recognise. It's one of those, isn't it? You don't recognise anyone who plays in the England team or the England cricket team or any of that sort of stuff. But I think who is the shadow this secretary? Who is the foreign secretary for that? I don't know, and I don't know whether that's because I'm disinterested, or is it down to them to make it interested? I don't know. I think it's more about, you pick it now. Is it relevant to you? I mean, because I focus on, for example, the newsroom next week, 100 countries across the global south. I tend to look at lots of foreign news feeds and then find out about what's going on in the UK by foreign journalists reporting on it. It's fascinating, actually, when you look at something like Northern Ireland and the Troubles, when he was doing that conversation with Paul Riley about how international photojournalists covered the Troubles in Northern Ireland over that period of time as opposed to our newspapers. Very interesting about, because it was just over the water from mainland UK, our photojournalists would go over there and kind of zip backwards and forwards, whereas, international journalists had to go and sort of embed themselves a little bit and kind of reported on it a bit more from the ground, if you like, less superficially.
What was the difference in the style?
It was just the fact that it was more about people and the impact on both sides of the communities and the reality of the situation, as opposed to a journalist would go over to cover like a riot or the marching season, or they would go over to report on something that had happened at the border. And I suppose it's the same with the UK. Well, I mean, when I look at the Parallel Lives project, the 100 countries across the global south, I say to people I ignore, from a documentary media, film, photography, audio, new media point of view, North America, Europe, so Russia, China, Japan, Australia and New Zealand and stuff like that, because those places tend to impact on the developing world or the countries in the global south. So actually the best way to do a documentary media project about China is look at all the countries that are being impacted by its Belt and Road policy rather than the Chinese themselves, because it will tend to come across that it's a little bit more sort of stage managed, whereas in those countries you'll get sort of opposition media, for example, or alternative media will turn around and say, well, actually it was great that we've got that port now in Sri Lanka, but the Sri Lankan government can't afford it, so now the port's Chinese. They've taken the ownership back because of the way that the money was done. So I think sometimes looking at international media, you tend to get a very different view of Britain, and also what they think about why we were thinking about Brexit or why Brexit went ahead, and then you suddenly realise that there's 3 or 4 leading members of the EU that are probably on the sort of brink of their own Brexit challenges, so. But we don't really hear about that because we still talk about Brexit, and have we got was it said the other day that we've got our free trade agreement with the Japanese is in trouble because of blue Stilton cheese.
Yeah,
and obviously we're back talking to Australia and New Zealand again, former colonial locations for the British Empire, where we used to get all our lamb and beef from, and so we're back to getting our beef and lamb from then after the sort of 30, 40 year experiment,
isn't it?
And that's it. I mean, that's the situation that you've got. We're having free trade agreements with people that we should never have not had agreements with.
And that's an indication of kind of the nationalism and exceptionalism that's taken over, is that you only see yourself from your own chauvinism, from your own perspective, and that your own perspective becomes normalised. And, the things that kind of were done in the name of the empire and the colonial administration are up there against other pernicious, nasty forms of kind of world standard kind of crimes, but no there isn't that national conversation. There hasn't been that national conversation about them, so you're left with a kind of I kind of know when this moment happened, and it was I had a dream a few weeks ago about you've seen the film A Matter of Life and Death, the Powell and Pressburger one?
No.
Oh, you really need to watch it. It's the one with David Niven, and he's an air pilot, he's an RAF pilot, and he's coming back from a bombing mission, and the plane's all shot up, and the rest of the crew have been killed, and he has to bail out. And bailing out in the fog over the channel He gets missed by the attending angel who would take him up to heaven. And in the meantime, he's fallen in love with an American radio operator. She's at the base where he's guiding him in, kind of thing. And it's about the story of kind of how he has to kind of deal with this challenge of a trial to make a case that it was the fault of the people in heaven. But there's a moment in it with the actor Roger Livesey, who's a great actor, and he ends up in his defence in this trial in heaven, and he's this kind of Donish kind of guy in a tweed suit with a pipe, that kind of thing, and he's presenting this case on behalf of David Niven's character, and he's being prosecuted by this American general who from the War of Independence, and they talk about the rights of the common man and the uncommon man, and Livesey says, the rights of the uncommon man, that's what is the priority. And for me, that was that kind of moment, 1946, where power was handed over to the United States as the world authority. But also when Britain retrenched into a form of denialism and exceptionalism to say, well, the uncommon man, we're different, we're exceptional. It's just one of those moments when you watch the film, you're looking for a pivot point of how world history changes, and that was a clear indicator, a sign of power being handed over to a new empire, Pax Americana, from Pax Britannica to Pax Americana, but that moment and the reason it was done, the reason that was to say, well, we're wrapped up in this history of Milton and Shakespeare and Chaucer and all that kind of stuff, and the Canterbury Tales and everything, so that makes us different. And no conversation was then got into about any of the colonial history and the oppression and the position around the world of invading other countries and terrorising them for generations.
And I think that comes out, doesn't it? That comes out in with the rugby football unions going to question singing "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," and where that comes from. And then we start talking about when the statue came down in Bath, we start talking about Bristol. Sorry. He went for a bath, didn't he? He went for a bath in Bristol, Colston. About where some of these wording come from, these sort of last night at the proms and stuff like that. Where
jingoism.
Yeah, and I think that's what and we say that we're not in that situation or we're not impacted by things like that, but we are, because at the moment we're involved in something that's about making Great Britain great again. Britain great again, as much as anyone who's wearing a red hat saying "Make America Great Again." We're bought into that as much as anything else, through the fact that we don't question why certain people are sacrificed. Why older people have been sacrificed in care homes and stuff. And of course, that's going to lead to a situation where people won't put their elderly relatives into care homes because they won't trust them. So, of course, what happens then is people that do run good care homes won't be able to survive, and then the ones that are left will be even more exploitative, and then more people will be abandoned and ignored at home because there's no one there to look for them, because the whole thing is it's like a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And so we don't have these conversations. There's people like us who, or I would say, are on the fringes of society, that are having these conversations, but you can never really seem to penetrate it into where you're talking to people that are making policy and shaping it, because that's always about protecting the elites and doing stuff that's keeping people at arm's length, and let's keep them busy talking about that rather than sort of trying to engage people in conversations and making it better, because there's money to be saved in getting things right, but these people at the top aren't interested in saving money, they're interested in making money. So actually they prefer you to be in distress, because there's money in selling solutions to people being in distress.
Yeah. So you become a consultant for you become a policy consultant, and
SPAD.
Exactly, a special advisor. And you've got somehow you've got this secret which you are able to impart, which brings certain kind of ticks some kind of boxes, and the kind of culture of And it's very attractive. I'd love to be part of it, but I've never been invited. Are you disappointed that you don't get invited to
Not at all.
policy decision meetings?
No. I was saying to someone the other day, I got to the point, particularly when I ended Citizens Eye in 2014, of going to events that were meant to be cutting edge, radical, going to be doing things, not politically, but sort of, talking about things like that. And I recognised everybody there. And I looked around and I'm like, well, I've had conversations with you and I believe that you are genuinely here for the right reason. And you look at other people and you go, well, you're here for the lunch. You're here because you turn up at the opening of an envelope. So there's actually it's not about change at all. So it's just like, let's all be radical within this echo chamber.
Yeah.
And then the fact that let's arrange another event where we can be radical again. No one's really interested in making any kind of change or moving the thing forward. Why? Because as soon as an opportunity comes along to make money in that area, they will monetize it, and then they will own it and manipulate it to the point where it's exploitative. Why? Because it's about making money. It's not about helping people. Britain has a history, of supporting dictators and strong men and authoritarian regimes every time, rather than supporting movements that come from the people, because they were always then said, well, they're socialists, they're communists, so therefore they're against us.
Because we're selling police equipment, arms and things like that. That's where the real interest lies.
And I think if you could suddenly turn around and say, well, this family on this boat coming from France are making their way to Britain because they're from Yemen and they were bombed out of their home and half their family was killed by weapons dropped by the RAF or from the RAF or produced by British Aerospace. Where's that kind of reporting? I don't see that kind of report.
Yeah, the responsibility. And that, I suppose one of the things that is missing from that, the circle is that social responsibility element. And it isn't in our, it's been pushed out of our universities, it's been pushed out of our teaching system. And our social accountability system is lacks that sense of, I suppose one of the things maybe the pandemic is teaching people, and a lot of people are in denial about, is accepting responsibility. So you say about care homes. Part of the problem we've got with care homes is that people have just dumped their parents into care homes, and we don't have. And there might be good reasons for that on an individual basis, but on a collective basis, it means that we've got this warehousing of elderly people cut off. And we have an apartheid. One of the things clearly noted that we can note from the experience is that we live in a society which treats children appallingly. There's no kids out in the streets playing out. Old people aren't to be found in the streets. It's run. The urban areas are run for a very narrow group of people. And everybody else be damned. You can't use the space because it's not safe, or it's not perceived to be safe. So I don't know where I was going with that point. I was kind of flying off on one, wasn't I?
You got distracted, mate.
Yeah.
You therapied yourself and been distracted.
Yeah, it's kind of like you run out of your own indignation after some time. But
I've done a couple of pre-records over the last few days, ready for next week's newsroom with a filmmaker in Saudi who's got caught up in lockdown there. Someone in the States, and then also this morning someone in Kenya, and I was just talking about the fact that for all of my views and stuff, I'm very hopeful. I'm very kind of optimistic and stuff, because I think we need to be that. It's more about when we realise there's shared humanity and the sort of the commonality between people, that maybe lockdown and the pandemic and COVID-19 and the impact on everybody everywhere, which has been different. I understand that. It means suddenly, that there is going to be a movement for change, and the fact that you've got people in Thailand that are, risking a great deal by questioning the royalty, the monarchy, building on what the students are doing, what's going on in China against that authority, Taiwan, Belarus and stuff like that. So if you were to say, well, there was an Arab Spring and now there's just kind of like a spring of people just turning around and just saying, do you know what, we are on the receiving end of some kind of quite draconian manipulation and stuff, and being at the bottom, and where are the opportunities? Hopefully there's a groundswell of not radical revolution, or anything that involves violence, but nothing ever comes without struggle. And I think that we're probably going to get into this decade will be a decade of real struggle. Whether that's to organise and meet and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, I think it's not going to come about through normal. Without change, change is only going to come from people by doing things. People, and it's not about voting. You can't do anything through voting anymore. I think that's become a bit of a misnomer now, or been proven the fact that just because you vote for someone, anything's going to change.
It'll be more direct and deliberative and participative democracy forms, and then the voting system will change as a consequence of that. One of the things it would be nice to see change. There's a lot of change being built in now with things like kind of traffic and transport changing, and kind of closing off streets and pedestrianisation, and maybe
which would never have happened without a lack of traffic due to people being furloughed,
and things like limiting the number of people who go into a pub and limiting the volume that music's played at, and those things that will have an unintended consequence. It will have a knock-on effect, and will it mean that there'll then be a change in people's attitudes and dispositions, and then a kind of focus on the quality of life rather than just the quantity of it, because that's what we've been told we should focus on. Get more life, grab more life, have more of everything, do more of everything, whereas actually the lockdowns told us no, you've got to stop.
I think what was interesting the other day, someone came to me and said about the podcast. Can I come on the podcast? Because I've been speaking to someone who works in a shop down there, and lockdown really made her think about the fact that because she couldn't go shopping and stuff, she started looking more about where her clothes come from, sort of looking a bit more ethically about the amount of money that was spent, where you're sourcing. Can we come on the podcast and talk about it? And I was like, that's brilliant, because that's not you forcing or suggesting someone coming on and saying, well, because you've not been able to spend money, have you changed your shopping habits? And because have you thought any more about where you get your clothes from because of lockdown? That's people that have kind of come to that conclusion themselves. And what that normally means is if that person's had that epiphany, so's other people. And so I think maybe it's a case of, rather than leading people down the primrose path, it's more about reacting to people when they come to you to say, I'm interested in this, can I talk about that? And you go, absolutely, because then it's about getting people to talk about what they're interested in, because you just know that it means that other people are interested as well. Yeah,
and you'll be surprised how many, when you connect yourself with other people and start avoiding what the media professionals are telling you that you should be interested in, actually you find that there are people out there who want to have similar kinds of conversations. And
well, I mean, you look at today, it's a really sunny day, sitting here. Now, it would be easy for you and I to sit here now in the sunshine and get burnt. Yeah, because we're sitting here thinking, well, we're going to do this podcast for an hour. It's only when someone else comes along and says, you do realise that you might be getting burnt. Oh, are you okay? You're looking a bit red. Josh brought us out some water and stuff like that. You suddenly think to yourself, oh, yes, it's so obvious. Yeah, and I think that's what happens. People have been living their lives in the way that they want to. I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong from living the life the way they've been living their life. That's down to you. But suddenly it's only when you get something that is a change that is long enough, like the 3 months of lockdown, 4 months, 5 months, that you suddenly realise, actually, I'm not missing any of that. I'm not missing. I mean, I can't at the minute. I find it really struggle. I've really struggled watching anything on Netflix or Amazon in one go. I don't know what it is. Is it the heat? Is it lockdown? Is it the fact the attention span?
Well, I think one of the things that has happened is we've adjusted to start to think more and to look inwards more.
I hope so.
And because you find. I mean, I'm fine with reading and fine with music at the moment. I went through a long period through the lockdown of not being able to listen to any music. Couldn't watch any TV. Couldn't watch any films or anything. So it was kind of just keep yourself busy and do some work. But it's the inner world that we've not entertained, or that's the wrong word to use. That
I suppose that's the well-being, isn't it? That's the well-being, the mental well-being and stuff.
And we're starting to do that again. Okay, so
I enjoyed that. Thanks, Rob. You distracted me.
Well,
we always said these were therapy, didn't we?
Have a rant, and it's probably listen back to this one and go, oh my god, what was he talking about on that one? But so, what's the way for anybody to get in contact with you?
Probably follow on Twitter @Doc Media Centre and get involved in next week's 24-hour newsroom on Wednesday the 19th of August. That'd be cool.
And the website address for that is...
Probably the best thing to do is go to the Documentary Media Centre Facebook page, and then they can find out the information and watch a lot of the interviews with people across the world.
Cool. So we do our other podcast as well, which is the Decentered Media podcast, and this is just like a sideline, something that we can enjoy as a difference and don't have to talk and think, but we still talk and think, so we don't know all the answers at all. So if you want to get in contact with me, I'm on Rob W Media on Instagram and Twitter, and the website is robwatsonmedia.net. But until next time, I'm going to go and get out of the sun for a bit, so I'll speak to you soon.
This is a Distraction Therapy podcast. Whatever gets you through the day.